This was definitely one of the most enjoyable episodes of No Guns Life. It just felt very personal, and I think something that I've been craving a lot more of, without really realizing it until this episode, is we're surrounded by so much machinery, so much tech, and these extendeds, right? And even though there's these very human stories at play, just having someone who doesn't look as artificial. Yes, Colt definitely had a lot of modifications done to him, but he wasn't a revolver for a head, right? He had human appearances, and seeing such a personal, family-driven story pushed to such an extreme degree of crime just so he can feed his family while punishing those who he deems to be scummy and corrupt, it just kind of felt very emotional. I think everyone, probably after last week's episode, probably expected that someone wasn't going to make it out alive, and Colt most likely would be the one who would get the short end of the stick. But once I saw the intro to this episode and just seeing how his sisters, his family, are starving, most likely their mother just not doing too well there, I mean, it was heartbreaking, right? Obviously, terrorism, exploding even criminals, that is not the way to go. Even if there was 100% guarantee that no innocent civilians would be in the crossfire, you don't want to become those that have been ruining your life, right? It just feels so heartbreaking to see what he had to go through, but put into his shoes, I think most people would probably do the same thing, especially if you're seeing your family starving and just worse than death because of such scummy people. But of course, if you're not on the end of the barrel there and you're kind of the bird's eye view or you're just a bystander, of course you realize there's other ways to deal with this, right? But it is unfortunate, but it was a good way to go, because having Colt die looking at his family, it was a bittersweet end. But I mean, was there any other way? Should he really just kind of like shake it off like a shonen hero? No. It was cute to have that moment, but it was clear as day once he asked Tetsuro to basically walk him home because he couldn't. He wasn't going to make it out alive. He just wanted to see one last look at his family. Though I do wonder, what is going to happen to his family now? Are they going to be looked after like from marrying them, or I don't know, but it's not looking good. That's all I can say. I really enjoyed this episode of No Guns Life, even ignoring just the really personal motivations of Colt. Like, I actually was surprised that Juzo didn't come into contact with, like, marrying them. I actually thought they would. I mentioned it last week. But it definitely feels like there's still time for that. I still feel like there's going to be at some point when she locates her brother, Juzo's going to locate him as well. It's not going to be a happy reunion, and there's definitely going to be some conflict. I just thought that conflict would be related to Colt, but so far it really isn't. Yes, he definitely is tied into what happened, but he didn't actually appear in this episode like I thought he would. But still, watching that all play out and it actually got my guard down for a bit. Like, I was definitely expecting Colt to die in this episode last week, the beginning of this episode. But then they started directing it as if he wasn't going to die. And I was like, okay, that actually is taking me for a loop, because I was letting my guard down, just looking at the story at play, just kind of run its course. And then to see that so scummy yet so genius, taking the people who were supposed to die, getting them differently, and then just having innocent kids and, the singers. Basically, you're going to make these people, these extendeds, look even worse because they killed such innocent bystanders, and you have no regards. Like, at the very least, you could argue Colt was, yes, he was still a murderer, he was going to murder people, but at the very least, in his mind, logically, he thought there was no way innocent people would be caught into this. But it also shows you why a life of crime isn't the way to take out crime, as even though he was perfectly prepared, or so he thought, innocent people almost got blown the hell up. But I will say that entire back and forth and seeing Tetsuro in a pretty cool body, I have to say, this might have been my favorite extended that he took over. There is something just so silly looking at it, but at the same time, it was kind of badass seeing what he was able to do. And then just the whole idea of train conflict, we really haven't seen that since episode 1 when Juzo punched the train off the track. So it was kind of nice having them just kind of ride the train, and there was just a lot of like back and forth dialogue, some badass moments, and then the whole idea that I was like, okay, 100%, the man's finally dying, he's going to take the explosive. But then it was like, okay, doesn't look like it's happening, and then Tetsuro hurts himself to do it. I just felt like there's a lot of back and forth where my mind was thinking, okay, dying, not dying, dying, not dying, guess not dying. And then by the time obviously the episode wraps up, I was like, man, they really got me to let my guard down for a little bit there. And that's nice, because I did see a lot of people speculating that Colt, there's no way he's going to make it out alive next week, and it was for obvious reasons. You've seen the formula before, but what this episode did very smartly was how they definitely gave him death flags, but at the same time, there's plenty of moments throughout this episode that it felt like maybe because he isn't extended, that he wouldn't be hurt, maybe it would be his family or something like that, revenge. You always could expect something like that in a story such as No Guns Life. But to see the direction they took it, especially with Tetsuro being able to toss the bomb away, I was like, okay, yes, he's been shot, but maybe they're directing it as if he's not going to be able to walk anymore, and that's going to be his penalty, that he can't make money for his family, but also he doesn't have to die. Like, I was totally expecting that his just body would be so destroyed he wouldn't have the money to repair it, and then maybe his family would starve, and then Mary and Tetra would do something to help them. Like, that's honestly how I was expecting the episode to end, especially when it looked like he was brushing it off. I was like, okay, clearly he's not 100% human. It wouldn't be completely irrational to think that he could get shot up a bunch of times and be able to shake it off because, well, I mean, look at what happens to Juzo, right? Like, he's had some serious damage done to him, and he's made it out alive. So, it wouldn't be shocking. So that's what I really like, is how, even though a lot of people, myself included, were expecting the death, at the same time, they direct it in such a way that there was multiple moments, and especially the most important moment, it kind of looked like he'd be okay, because these are extendeds. You don't really know what's going to be the final push that's going to make him go off the deep end and actually lose their life, but at the very least, he did get to see his family one last time, but it just actually is terrifying. A family we really just got introduced to is now basically moneyless. The person who is taking care of them, like, what is going to happen? I hope they don't just leave us off on that. I hope we do get to see something, but at the same time, if they don't ever show us more, maybe it will be better, because maybe seeing what's to come with their life isn't actually all that great. Like, that's what I really love, is that they got this very human and genuine relationship through an extended that actually looked a lot more human. So it was a lot easier to connect with him, as yes, you can look at Tetra and see what's happened to him and feel bad for him, but it's a lot harder to connect with him on a personal level, because even though he looks human, he doesn't talk. Like, his mouth like opens once and he talks through like a helmet. Like, there's not a lot of like humanity in a visual sense. There's a lot of humanity in the personal sense, but it's very easy to not feel like you can connect with these characters because, well, they don't look all that human. But when you have someone who actually looks fairly human, his mouth actually moves when he talks, it feels like this could have happened to anyone put in his shoes. And even though terrorism was not the right outcome, as seen by the end result, and just rationally thinking about it before you even attempted it, you could see a lot of people going down the same path if your family's starving and just, basically a vegetable. And that's what's so great. It's like, No Guns Life has this really interesting approach to storytelling where all the sides of the political spectrum, the underground, the main faces on television, and just the people and the innocent bystanders, it feels like it's a story about an evolving future, something that could happen to anyone, and whether you're put in the position with the money, you most likely would have ended up doing the same thing they've done to these people as experiments, or if you're on the short end of the stick, you would feel just rage and wanting to get revenge for everything that's happened to you. And just the way they directed this episode, it really captured a pretty complex atmosphere. I was actually quite surprised we didn't get too much Juzo in this episode, but the moments we did get with him were actually kind of interesting, because it almost felt like from Tetsuro's side, it was the heroic, but obviously not doing everything by the book, and then every time we focus on Juzo, it almost made him look like the villain with how they're lighting it in. There was some cool shots with Juzo, I have to say. Beautiful lighting in this episode, 100%. It's almost like romantic but depressing light to just really capture such a complex atmosphere. And when they had to go completely just depressing, either with music or just voice acting, they got it across. Less is more is something that I feel like a lot of voice actors don't get across that well, but Colt's voice actor, when he realized, like, he knew he was gonna die, but he was kind of playing it up as he was fine, and, just help me out, buddy, let's get me home, I'll be alright. It felt like there was a lot of pain, a lot of disappointment in his voice, as if he was a failure, that he was leaving his family for nothing, but just in his final moments, he wanted that one last goodbye, even though realistically he knew he wouldn't be able to say it. I really appreciate the voice acting in this series, especially when they have to go emotional. It doesn't feel forced, it actually feels genuine, as if it's someone believing in what they're acting for, and that goes a hell of a long way, especially in a series with so much mechanical and artificial imagery that you can't relate to on a personal level. However, when you hear the voice actors really give those really emotional performances, it lets you buy into everything at hand, not feeling like it's just this cheesy anime scene, but rather something that wants to bring a tear to your eye and make you feel these deep-rooted emotions. It really just felt like No Guns Life went on a really perfect path. It was emotional, it was action-packed, but it also felt realistic despite so much machinery on a visual level, and I really hope to see more episodes like this in No Guns Life future. I mean, the cliffhanger after the credits there, gonna be interesting to see what's gonna happen. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a very Juzo-focused episode next week, now that Colt's kind of out of the picture. Most likely they're all gonna be brought together, but at the same time, maybe they'll kind of still stay separated as they basically search for the same goal without realizing it. I don't know, but the future of No Guns Life is looking rather bright, what can I say? I forget when I've mentioned it, but it was a while back when I think I was first discussing Tetsuo Light, or maybe even Juzo, because a lot of these characters, like, they don't have animation for, like, their dialogue because they're either a revolver head or they're a character who can't actually talk, his voice comes through like a mask. But it's actually interesting how Madhouse is getting across emotion with just directing, as if instead of like keeping a shot on a character because their mouth flaps are moving, rather you get these like wider shots, these more emotional perspectives to actually capture these atmospheres in such a brilliant light. I feel like a lot of anime, they don't have to really go that creative with directing for just general dialogue, because you can look at a character from one side, look at him from another, and that gets the job done. But with No Guns Life, they actually have to take these liberties to do things that are a lot more interesting, as you literally have characters who can't talk in the traditional sense. Yes, their dialogue comes out, but their mouth doesn't move because they don't really have one. So just to see like an episode like this, yes, there was definitely humans talking as you have Colt and other characters, but there's a lot of like really complex shots that got across such vulnerable emotions just because of the way they were, pulling back in the perspective, lighting the shot in an interesting way, the mood lighting. It actually gets across so much emotion despite not being able to do things in the traditional anime sense. And it'd be nice to see more anime in the future take these liberties, because even though you usually have characters whose mouths can actually move, it would be nice to see more teams just pull back the camera a bit more, shift up the lighting, and give more vulnerable emotions in terms of its visual directing, because it would go a long way added on to the obvious mouth flaps, because it's something that I think will go underappreciated with No Guns Life, but the more people who watch it will probably pick up on this really fascinating detail, or at least I know I did. But what did everyone think of this episode, either for source material readers, anime originals, whatever the hell you're feeling about what I consider to be a great episode of No Guns Life? Let me know down in that comment section below, and if you did enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new. So until next time everyone, please take care, have a good one.